What happens when an entire galaxy discovers that the species they dismissed as primitive backwater savages has been quietly building the most terrifying war machine the universe has ever seen? When a desperate alien alliance sends out a galaxy-wide distress call, expecting nothing from the isolated Sol system, they're about to learn why you should never underestimate humanity's capacity for both compassion and absolute destruction. The cosmos is about to witness what happens when Earth's children finally step out of the shadows, and the predators of the galaxy realize they've been hunting in the wrong neighborhood all along. The communication array on Kepler Station had been broadcasting the same desperate message for 47 standard hours when Commander Zara Chen first heard it. The translation software struggled with the alien linguistics, producing fragments that made her blood run cold. Devourer fleets advancing. 7 systems fallen, requesting immediate assistance, any species capable of. Chen leaned back in her command chair, watching the holographic display flicker with incoming data from across known space. The message originated from the Andorian Collective, a proud species that had never once acknowledged Earth's existence in their diplomatic channels. Now they were screaming into the void, begging anyone who could hear them for help. Captain Morrison to the bridge. Chen called through the comm system. Within minutes, her superior officer appeared, his weathered face showing the strain of recent months. The war against the Devourers had been raging for 2 years, but Earth had remained officially neutral, watching from the sidelines as entire civilizations crumbled. "What's our status on the message?" Morrison asked, settling into his chair beside her. "Still receiving fragments. The translation is getting clearer." Chen pulled up the latest decode. "Sir, they're not just asking for military support. They're begging for evacuation assistance. The Devourers aren't just conquering worlds, they're consuming every living thing on them."
Morrison nodded grimly.
He'd seen the classified reports from Earth intelligence. The Devourers were unlike any threat the galaxy had faced. They didn't want territory or resources in the traditional sense. They wanted biomass, converting entire populations into fuel for their ever-expanding fleets. What made them truly terrifying wasn't just their technology, but their complete disregard for any form of life that wasn't their own. "Sir, incoming priority transmission from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Sarah Reeves, head of Earth's Deep Space Command. Her expression was stone-cold serious, the kind of look that preceded life-changing orders. "Commander Morrison, you are hereby ordered to return to Earth immediately. Bring your senior staff." Operation Thunderstrike has been approved by the Global Defense Council. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Operation Thunderstrike was the contingency plan that everyone hoped would never be necessary. It meant Earth was finally entering the galactic war, but not in any way the alien civilizations expected. As Kepler Station began its journey back toward the Sol system, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. She'd spent her entire career serving on humanity's most advanced deep space research platform, conducting surveys and diplomatic missions to maintain Earth's carefully neutral stance. But neutrality was a luxury they could no longer afford. The journey to Earth took 18 days, during which time the alien distress calls became increasingly desperate. Entire star systems were going dark, their final transmissions cut short by something too horrible to imagine. By the time they reached Sol, Chen had counted 17 confirmed system losses, representing billions of sentient lives. Earth looked different as they approached. The orbital shipyards that had once produced peaceful exploration vessels now swarmed with activity. Massive construction frameworks stretched between Luna and the asteroid belt, housing projects that defied classification. Chen had never seen ships like these before. Angular, predatory things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Welcome home," Morrison said quietly, but his voice carried no warmth. The briefing room at Lunar Command was packed with officers Chen had never seen before. Their uniforms bore insignia from departments she didn't recognize: Deep Strike Command, Xenological Warfare Division, Psionic Operations Bureau. These weren't the peaceful explorers and diplomats she'd grown up admiring. These were soldiers preparing for a war unlike anything in human history. Admiral Reeves began the briefing without preamble. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 50 years, Earth has maintained a policy of studied isolation from galactic politics. This was not due to weakness or fear, but because we were preparing." The lights dimmed as a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. It showed the galaxy from an unprecedented perspective, not the political maps the alien civilizations used, but a tactical assessment that revealed humanity's true position in space. While the major galactic powers were engaged in trade disputes and territorial expansions, we were building not just ships or weapons, but an entire military-industrial complex designed for one specific purpose: to end existential threats to sentient life. Chen stared at the display in shock. Hidden throughout what other species considered empty space were massive installations, fortress worlds, automated manufacturing systems, and fleets of ships that dwarfed anything she'd seen in the civilian database. The Devourers represent exactly the kind of threat we've been preparing for, Reeves continued. They're not interested in coexistence, negotiation, or even traditional conquest. They're a cancer that consumes everything in their path, and according to our projections, they'll reach the outer rim of human space within 6 months. A new officer stepped forward, General Marcus Webb, whose name Chen recognized from classified reports. He was the architect of humanity's shadow military, the man who'd spent decades preparing for this moment. Our response will be swift and absolute, Webb announced. We will not attempt to match the Devourers in a war of attrition. Instead, we will demonstrate why humanity earned its place as the apex predator of Sol. The holographic display shifted, showing attack vectors and fleet movements that made Chen's head spin. Thousands of ships were already in motion, emerging from hidden bases throughout human space. But these weren't the lumbering dreadnoughts favored by other species. They were fast, stealthy, and designed for overwhelming first strikes. The aliens have been receiving our distress response for the past 12 hours, Webb continued. They believe we're sending a small relief force to help with evacuations. They have no idea what's actually coming. Chen raised her hand tentatively. Sir, what about the other galactic powers? The ones still fighting the Devourers? Reeves smiled for the first time since the briefing began, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. They'll learn what every bully eventually discovers. When you spend centuries dismissing someone as weak and primitive, you tend to forget that quiet doesn't mean helpless. The briefing continued for hours, revealing the scope of humanity's hidden preparations. Entire asteroid belts had been converted into automated weapon factories. Dead worlds had been hollowed out and turned into fortress ships. Most shocking of all, humanity had developed technologies that the major galactic powers didn't even have theoretical frameworks for understanding. Your mission, Webb addressed Morrison directly, is to take Kepler Station and serve as forward command for the first wave of operations. You'll be working directly with refugee evacuation efforts, while our combat fleets handled the Devourers themselves. As the officers filed out, Chen caught Morrison's arm. Sir, how long has Earth been planning this? Morrison looked older than his years as he answered. Since first contact, Commander. The moment we realized we weren't alone in the universe, we also realized we needed to be ready for the day when being alone might be preferable to the alternatives. The next morning, Chen stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station as they prepared to depart for the war zone. Around them, humanity's hidden fleet was finally emerging from the shadows. Ship after ship materialized from what had appeared to be empty space, their stealth systems powering down to reveal the true extent of Earth's military might. She counted over 3,000 vessels in the first wave alone, and according to the briefings, this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, alien civilizations were about to discover that the species they'd dismissed as backward and isolated had been quietly preparing to reshape the galaxy. The Devourers had made a critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed that a galaxy full of civilized, peaceful species would be easy prey. They hadn't counted on the one species that had evolved in a system where peace was earned through strength, and kindness was backed by the absolute certainty of overwhelming retaliation. As Kepler Station jumped to hyperspace, carrying Chen toward her first real war, she couldn't help but wonder how the galaxy would look when it was over. One thing was certain: the universe was about to learn why Earth had spent so long preparing, and why humanity's silence had never been a sign of weakness. The distress calls were still coming in from across the galaxy, but soon they would be answered by more than just empty promises and evacuation ships. They would be answered by the righteous fury of a species that had spent millennia learning how to protect what mattered most, not just their own survival, but the survival of anyone worth saving. The galaxy was about to meet Earth's children, and the meeting would be written in fire across the stars. The Andorian homeworld was dying when the first human ships arrived. Commander Chen watched through the main viewport as Kepler Station dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system. What should have been a thriving hub of galactic civilization was now a graveyard of twisted metal and burning cities. Massive Devourer ships, each the size of a small moon, hung in orbit around Andoria Prime like parasites feeding on a dying host. My God, whispered Lieutenant Torres from beside her. The whole planet looks like it's bleeding. The atmosphere itself seemed wrong, tinted with a sickly red glow that pulsed with each energy transfer from the planet's surface to the Devourer fleet. They were literally draining the life force from everything below, converting biomass into fuel for their continued expansion across the galaxy. Status report, Chen called to her tactical officer. 17 Devourer capital ships in orbit, approximately 300 smaller vessels conducting surface operations. I'm reading massive bioenergy extraction patterns across all major population centers. Lieutenant Commander Park paused, checking her readings again. Commander, based on the extraction rate, they'll have consumed every living thing on the planet within 6 hours. Captain Morrison stepped onto the bridge, his face grim with purpose. Any sign of the Earth fleet? Chen was about to respond when space itself seemed to shimmer around them. One by one, human warships began materializing from stealth, their black hulls drinking in starlight until they were visible only as moving shadows against the cosmic background. The sight sent chills down Chen's spine. She'd never seen ships designed to be so perfectly invisible, so utterly predatory. Earth Fleet Command to all vessels, came Admiral Rodriguez's voice over the comm system. This is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the ENS Retribution. All units prepare for synchronized assault. Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to end this. Chen counted the ships as they decloaked. 50 heavy cruisers, each bristling with weapons she couldn't identify. 100 smaller destroyers that moved with an unnatural grace, their hulls inscribed with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow. And at the center of it all, the flagship Retribution, a kilometer-long monster that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of midnight. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated how different human warfare was from anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the traditional long-range bombardment that other species favored, the human ships simply disappeared again. Not cloaked, actually gone, as if they had never existed at all. Chen's senses showed empty space where moments before a massive fleet had been assembled. Where did they go? Torres asked, his voice tight with confusion. His answer came in the form of explosions across the Devourer fleet. The massive bioships that had been systematically draining Andoria suddenly found themselves under attack from weapons that seemed to materialize inside their shields. Hull breaches appeared spontaneously along critical systems, each one perfectly placed to cause maximum damage while avoiding the biostorage chambers where captured civilians were being held. Temporal displacement technology, Morrison said quietly, recognizing what he was seeing. They're not just attacking from stealth. They're attacking from multiple points in time simultaneously. Chen watched in fascination as the Devourer fleet tried to respond to an enemy they couldn't locate or predict. Their massive bioenergy beams swept empty space while human weapons continued to tear them apart from what appeared to be nowhere. It wasn't a battle. It was a systematic dismantling of a force that had been considered unstoppable. This is Admiral Rodriguez to Kepler Station, came the voice over their comm. Begin evacuation operations immediately. We'll have the orbital space clear within 20 minutes. Chen couldn't believe what she was hearing. 20 minutes to destroy a fleet that had conquered 7 star systems? But as she watched, Devourer ships began breaking apart with increasing frequency. Their biostorage chambers jettisoned safely toward Kepler Station's evacuation bays, while the rest of each vessel was systematically vaporized. Commander, called Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sirakim over the intercom. We're receiving the first wave of survivors. You need to see this. Chen made her way to the medical bay, where she found scenes that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The rescued Andorians weren't just traumatized, they were fundamentally changed by their experience with the Devourers. Their natural blue-green skin had taken on a sickly pallor, and many showed signs of partial biological integration with Devourer technology. They were being converted. Dr. Kim explained as she worked to stabilize a young Andorian female. The Devourers don't just consume biomass, they assimilate it, turning other species into components of their collective organism. This girl was maybe hours away from complete integration when the humans attacked. Shen knelt beside the medical bed, looking into eyes that held intelligence and terror in equal measure. The Andorian spoke in halting standard Galactic, her voice barely above a whisper. You're from Earth? The primitive world beyond the rim? We're here to help, Chen said gently. The alien's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. We sent messages everywhere. No one came. No one cared. The Centauri said we were acceptable losses for galactic stability. The Meridian Federation offered thoughts and prayers. Even the hegemony abandoned us to preserve their trade routes. Chen felt a cold anger building in her chest. She'd read the classified intelligence reports. Earth had monitored the galactic response to the Devourer threat for months, watching as supposedly advanced civilizations made political calculations about which worlds were worth saving and which were expendable. "We're not like them," Chen said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. On the bridge, Morrison was coordinating with the human fleet as they systematically dismantled the Devourer presence throughout the system. It wasn't just the speed of the human victory that impressed him, it was the precision. Every shot was calculated to minimize civilian casualties while maximizing damage to Devourer infrastructure. "Status report from the surface," announced Lieutenant Park. "Human marine units have established secure perimeters around all major population centers. They're reporting successful neutralization of ground-based bioconversion facilities with minimal collateral damage." Morrison frowned. "Marine units? When did we deploy ground forces?" "Sir, according to the tactical display, they've been on the ground for approximately 6 hours. The temporal displacement technology allows our forces to begin operations before the fleet even arrives." The implications of what Morrison was hearing were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed advanced weapons, they'd fundamentally redefined the nature of warfare itself. While other species still thought in terms of linear battle progressions, Earth had learned to treat time as just another battlefield dimension to be exploited. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Rodriguez," announced Torres. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, and Morrison was struck by how calm she looked, despite having just orchestrated one of the most complex military operations in galactic history. "Captain Morrison, I'm transmitting updated tactical data to your station. We've confirmed 17 other worlds under active Devourer attack. Your mission is to coordinate refugee operations while our combat fleets handle direct engagement. Be advised, we're not just fighting to save these worlds. We're sending a message to the entire galaxy." The screen shifted to display a galaxy-wide tactical map that made Morrison's blood run cold. The Devourer advance had been far more extensive than the public reports indicated. Over 40 systems showed signs of bioharvesting operations, with more falling under attack every day. But what truly shocked him was the human response plan. Earth wasn't just deploying to defend threatened worlds. They were simultaneously striking at every known Devourer staging area, supply line, and command center across a front spanning thousands of light years. It was the most ambitious military operation in recorded galactic history, and humanity was executing it flawlessly. "Sir," called Dr. Kim from the medical bay, "the Endorian survivors are asking to speak with whoever's in charge. They say it's urgent." Morrison made his way to the medical bay, where he found 3 Endorian officials who had been rescued from the planetary government complex. Despite their obvious trauma, they maintained the dignity that their species was known for throughout the galaxy. "Captain Morrison of Earth Fleet Command," he said by way of introduction. The eldest Endorian, who introduced herself as Minister Zala, struggled to her feet despite Dr. Kim's protests. "Captain, we must warn you. The Devourers we faced here, they were only a scouting force. The main fleet is still coming, and they have capabilities your databases cannot possibly account for." Morrison felt his blood chill. "What kind of capabilities?" "They learn," Zala said simply. "Every species they consume, every technology they encounter, it all becomes part of their collective knowledge. They've been feeding on the galaxy's most advanced civilizations for 2 years. By now, they possess the combined military knowledge of dozens of species." Chen, who had been listening from nearby, stepped forward. "Minister, how many ships are in their main fleet?" Zala's expression grew haunted. "Before our communication arrays were destroyed, our deep space monitors detected over 10,000 capital ships moving toward the galactic core. Each one was larger than our entire planetary defense force." The medical bay fell silent as the implications sank in. Morrison realized that what they'd just witnessed at Andoria wasn't humanity revealing its full strength. It was barely a preview. If the Devourers had forces on the scale Zala described, the real war was yet to begin. "Captain," came Admiral Rodriguez's voice over the comm system, "we need to talk. Priority 1. My ready room, 1 hour." As Morrison prepared to leave for the meeting that would determine humanity's next move, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything they'd accomplished so far was just the opening move in a much larger game. The galaxy was about to discover not just how powerful Earth had become, but how far humanity was willing to go to protect innocent life. The rescued Andorians watched him leave with expressions of hope mixed with terror. They had seen what the Devourers were capable of, and now they had seen what humans could do in response. The question that remained was whether even Earth's hidden strength would be enough when the true enemy finally revealed itself. Outside the medical bay windows, human ships continued their systematic destruction of devourer infrastructure, while carefully preserving every possible survivor. It was a demonstration of power and precision that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. But for Morrison, it was just the beginning of humanity's promise to protect the defenseless, no matter the cost. Admiral Rodriguez's ready room aboard the ENS Retribution was a stark contrast to the elegant diplomatic quarters found on most galactic vessels. The walls were lined with tactical displays showing real-time intelligence from across known space, each screen revealing the true scope of humanity's shadow war against the Devourers. Captain Morrison entered to find Rodriguez studying a holographic projection that made his heart stop. The display showed the galactic core, where a massive fleet of Devourer ships was indeed approaching. Not the 10,000 Minister Zala had mentioned, but over 50,000 vessels of varying sizes, all converging on a trajectory that would bring them into contact with the major galactic civilizations within weeks. Satellite intelligence confirms the Andorian minister's worst fears, Rodriguez said without preamble.
But she was wrong about one crucial detail.
This isn't the main Devourer fleet, it's their advance guard. Deep space monitoring stations in the void between have detected energy signatures suggesting the actual fleet is at least 10 times this size. Morrison sank into the chair across from her, trying to process the magnitude of what they were facing. Admiral, even with everything we've built, how can we possibly stand against something that large? Rodriguez smiled, and Morrison was surprised to see genuine confidence in her expression. Captain, you're still thinking like the old galaxy. You're assuming this has to be a conventional war fought with conventional tactics. She gestured to the tactical displays around them.
But we're not a conventional species, and we didn't spend 50 years preparing to fight fair.
The display shifted, showing previously classified installations throughout human space. Morrison had thought he understood the scope of Earth's military preparations, but what he saw now defied comprehension.
Entire solar systems had been converted into weapons of unimaginable power. Dead stars had been rigged with controlled collapse mechanisms. Space itself had been weaponized in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The Devourers have made the same mistake that every aggressive species in galactic history has made, Rodriguez continued. They've confused tactical superiority with strategic invincibility. They're very good at consuming civilizations that fight by established rules, but they've never encountered a species that evolved to break rules as a survival strategy. Morrison studied the displays, beginning to understand the true scope of humanity's plan. We're not going to fight their fleet directly. Correct. We're going to make their fleet irrelevant. Rodriguez pulled up a new display showing the Devourer advanced routes. They're following predictable paths based on galactic trade routes and communication networks. They expect to encounter resistance at strategic choke points, so they've positioned their forces accordingly. But we're not going to be where they expect us to be. Better than that, we're going to make sure they never reach where they're going. Rodriguez activated a classified projection that showed the human fleet's true deployment. Ships weren't just positioned at threatened worlds, they were scattered throughout dimensions Morrison hadn't known existed. We're not fighting in space, Captain. We're fighting in space-time itself. The briefing continued for hours, revealing the full extent of Operation Thunderstrike. Humanity wasn't just planning to defeat the Devourers. They were planning to redefine the fundamental nature of galactic warfare. Using technologies developed in secret over decades, Earth would demonstrate that superior numbers meant nothing when your enemy could attack from the past, present, and future simultaneously. Your role in this will be crucial, Rodriguez told Morrison as the briefing concluded. While our combat fleets handle the Devourers, Kepler Station will coordinate with surviving galactic governments to manage the aftermath. Because when this is over, the political landscape of the galaxy will be fundamentally changed. Morrison understood what she meant. For centuries, the major galactic powers had maintained their positions through careful balance of military might and economic influence. They'd dismissed Earth as an irrelevant backwater while building their civilizations on the assumption that they were the apex predators in known space. Admiral, what happens to the existing power structures when this is over? Rodriguez's expression grew serious. That depends entirely on how they respond to what they're about to witness. Some of them will adapt and learn to treat humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. Others, she shrugged. Well, the Devourers won't be the only aggressive species to learn that the universe has rules about bullying the defenseless. 2 days later, Morrison stood on Kepler Station's bridge, watching as the largest space battle in galactic history began to unfold. The Devourer advance fleet had reached the outer systems of the core worlds, expecting to encounter the scattered resistance they'd faced throughout their conquest. Instead, they found something that shouldn't have been possible. The human fleet wasn't there to meet them. It was already among them. Morrison watched through long-range sensors as Devourer capital ships simply began disappearing. Not destroyed in conventional terms, literally erased from existence as human weapons struck them from temporal vectors that bypassed every known form of shielding. What had taken the Devourers months to build was undone in minutes by an enemy that refused to exist in the same time stream. "Commander Chen to the bridge," Morrison called. When she arrived, he gestured to the tactical display. "I want you to see this. Historians will study this battle for the next 1,000 years." Chen watched in fascination as the Devourer fleet tried to adapt to an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Their formations scattered, seeking to minimize losses from an attack pattern that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. But human strategy accounted for this response, using the Devourer's own adaptive nature against them. "It's beautiful," Chen said quietly. "Terrible, but beautiful. They're not just defeating the Devourers. They're teaching the entire galaxy a lesson about the consequences of predatory behavior." The lesson was being learned in real time. Across the galaxy, the major civilizations that had abandoned threatened worlds to preserve their own interests now watched as Earth single-handedly dismantled a threat that had seemed unstoppable. Emergency diplomatic channels that had been silent for months suddenly came alive with requests for communication with Earth Command. "Incoming transmission from the Hegemony Council," announced Lieutenant Torres. "They're requesting immediate diplomatic contact with Earth leadership." Morrison almost laughed. The hegemony had spent decades treating humanity's diplomatic overtures with dismissive arrogance. Now they were begging for attention from the species they'd considered primitive. "Tell them we're busy," Morrison said. "They can wait until we finish cleaning up the mess they helped create." On the main display, the Devourer advance fleet was in full retreat, but human forces weren't allowing them to escape. Ships that had consumed entire worlds found themselves pursued by an enemy that could attack across both space and time, ensuring that no Devourer vessel would survive to threaten innocent civilians again. But it was the arrival of the main Devourer fleet that truly demonstrated humanity's strategic genius. The massive armada dropped out of hyperspace expecting to reinforce their advance units, only to discover that their advance units had already been completely eliminated. Worse, they found themselves scattered across a dozen different solar systems, separated by human manipulation of their jump coordinates. "How are we doing this?" Chen asked, studying the tactical displays in amazement. Morrison pulled up a classified schematic that showed the true scope of human engineering. "We've been building gravity manipulation networks throughout this entire region of space. Every hyperspace jump the Devourers make takes them exactly where we want them to go, isolated, separated, and vulnerable to individual destruction." The main battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, the Devourer fleet that had threatened to consume the galactic core was nothing but debris and rescued prisoners. Human ships emerged from temporal displacement to begin rescue operations, carefully sorting Devourer victims from Devourer perpetrators, while ensuring that the genetic knowledge they'd stolen was preserved for eventual return to surviving species. But the real victory wasn't military, it was diplomatic. "Incoming communications from 37 different species governments," Torres announced. "They're all requesting emergency diplomatic meetings." Chen smiled as she watched the diplomatic board light up with requests from civilizations that had never acknowledged Earth's existence. The Meridian Federation, which had offered only thoughts and prayers to Devourer victims, was now begging for Earth's protection. The Centauri, who had calculated which worlds were acceptable losses, were offering trade agreements and military alliances. "What's our response?" she asked Morrison. Morrison looked at the displays showing human ships conducting rescue operations across a dozen systems, pulling survivors from Devourer biostorage chambers and beginning the long process of healing civilizations that had been written off by their supposed allies. "We tell them the same thing we told the hegemony," he said. "We're busy. They can wait until we finish helping the people they abandoned." Admiral Rodriguez's voice came over the comm system, addressing not just Kepler Station but the entire human fleet. "All units, this is command. Phase 1 of Operation Thunderstrike is complete. The Devourer threat has been neutralized. Begin Phase 2, humanitarian operations and diplomatic restructuring." Chen realized that the war they'd just witnessed was never really about defeating the Devourers. It was about demonstrating to the galaxy that humanity represented a fundamental shift in how civilizations would interact with each other. The old system of political calculation and acceptable losses was over. Earth had just announced that every innocent life had value, and that humanity had both the will and the capability to enforce that principle across known space. "Commander," Torres called excitedly, "we're receiving gratitude messages from over 200 different worlds."
They're calling it the Liberation.
Morrison nodded, watching as human ships continued their rescue operations across systems that had been written off as lost causes.
The galaxy would never be the same. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had just redefined the very nature of interstellar relations. "Signal Earth Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them the galaxy has received humanity's message, and they're ready to listen." Outside Kepler Station's viewports, the stars looked different somehow, not because anything had physically changed, but because the galaxy itself had transformed. The age of predators preying on the defenseless was over. In its place rose something new, a galactic community where strength served protection rather than exploitation, where advanced civilizations used their capabilities to uplift rather than abandon their neighbors. Earth's children had finally stepped out of the shadows, and the universe would never forget the lesson they taught. When innocents call for help, heroes answer, regardless of the odds, regardless of the cost, and regardless of what the established powers consider politically expedient. The distress calls that had started it all were finally silent, replaced by messages of hope, gratitude, and requests to join whatever humanity was building next. The galaxy had learned what it meant to have protectors who measured success not in territory conquered or enemies defeated, but in lives saved and civilizations preserved. Humanity's watch over the galaxy had officially begun.